If you've got something that God is putting onto your heart to step out in faith and obedience in, do it. Last week, we talked about looking to Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.
Correct.
When you think about faith, what comes to mind?
Trusting in something that you can't see, just like it states in
Yeah.
Hebrews.
You know, like this chair that these chairs we're sitting in.
Right.
We have faith that they're going to hold our weight.
Right.
We trust the things unseen about them. Like we don't know who put them together. We don't know how they were put together.
Right.
But we trust that they're going to do what they were there to do and bear our weight.
Right.
Right. So like last week we talked about faith. We talked about looking to Jesus. And I just think about all of these people of faith that have just trusted in the unseen and have blazed a trail. Like they have just stepped out with trust. With
Right.
blind, call it blind trust, call it blind faith, whatever you want to call it. They stepped out and just said, God said, hey, this is what I need from you.
Right.
They did it. Into new horizons, new directions, new everything. Everything about it is new.
Exactly.
And they did it. And like, I think my most favorite chapter of scripture is Hebrews chapter 11, right before what we talked about last time.
Right.
And he's talking about all of these people who by faith, action, all of them, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Joseph, Moses, all these people of faith from the Old Testament trusted and obeyed.
Correct.
Obviously the most famous biblical trailblazer that we've got is Abraham.
Absolutely. And whenever we look over in Genesis, and we see that Abraham was called by the Lord, or Abram at the time before his name was changed. But it's like, now the Lord said to Abraham, and this is Genesis 12, now the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you. I mean, imagine that.
That's vague.
Yeah, very, very,
Very
very
vague. But what's interesting too, to me, that's always been interesting to me is like when you read a little bit further, like it
Right.
tells you all that he packed up. Like this dude wasn't just like an average dude.
Right.
Like he was well off.
Right.
He had a big life to pack up and haul along with him. But what you don't see is him saying, you sure?
Right.
No.
He had
He
that faith.
packed up and
Verse 2, it says, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse.
Yeah.
And in you, all your families on the earth shall be blessed.
yeah.
Dude, imagine you got what, like 13 kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Five. Close.
Okay, close.
Mississippi
So,
math.
Yeah, we talked about Mississippi
Yeah.
last time. But imagine loading all your youngins up, your wife, your dogs,
Mhm.
in a little old trailer, and you're just heading off across the country.
With no
What are
yeah.
you gonna have in
Yeah.
place before you do that?
Yeah, you're going to try and make the preparations and the plans like, okay, well, this is where I feel like he's pointing us to go. So we're going to make sure we got a house to rent or,
Right.
Food that we're going to try and get all the things in place beforehand.
Right. You're going to make sure you have a good job. You're going to make sure you have a house.
Yeah.
You're going to make sure you have enough money for the trip.
Yeah.
You're going to make sure all these preparations. When you get there, if you don't have a house and you're renting somewhere, you're going to have storage for all your stuff that you're bringing with you. This dude didn't have none of that.
Yeah.
He just loaded up. Like you said, he had a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, I'm going to do what you said.
It says in Hebrews 11, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going.
Right.
So many times in, today, like you hear people that are like, man, I feel like God's telling me to do this.
Right.
And, sadly, there's a lot of people like, well, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do to prepare for this thing that God's calling you to do? It's like, instead we should be encouraging people to have that faith of Abraham. Like, go ahead, step out. I've got your back.
Right.
If I always go back to that scripture from Acts where the Pharisees are coming together against Peter and them, and they're like, we've got to stop this.
Right.
And the priest popped up and was like, look, if God's hand is on it, there's nothing we can do to stop it.
Right.
If God's hand isn't on it, then it's going to fail.
Right.
So like, leave it alone. Like, just let it be. So I look to that in the same, for when people have, callings of faith in front of them, like the same thing, like, hey, I'm here to support you. I'm here to encourage you. And if God's hand is on it, then nothing's going to stand in the way of it prevailing. Right. If his hand's not on it, then it's going to fail. We'll pick you up and we'll help you get back to where you can hear him clearly. You know what I mean? And 9 times out of the 10, like, I take that back. 10 times out of 10, if God's called you to do something,
right,
he's already accounted for everything and anything for you to go do that.
Right.
Even our ignorance.
Right.
Look at Abraham.
Yep. He's already made the way. He's already made the preparations.
Yeah. Even in Abraham's ignorance of like, oh no, that's my sister, and those silly moments where he made the decisions on his own accord, the plan was still the plan. And, no matter what happens, the Lord's will always prevail.
Well, that brings to mind something that I was reading last night in Samuel, where Saul was being selected as the king. And he comes, he says, okay, sit with us tonight. We're having a sacrifice and everything. Sit and eat with me. After that, he was anointed. Yeah. And then he's like, now you go this way. You go up here and you're going to see this dude. And then this guy's going to come and say, hey, don't worry about the donkeys no more. We found the donkeys. And then after that, you continue going and there's going to be 3 priests coming or prophets coming out and you're going to prophesy with them and blah, blah, blah. God made the way. God prepared the path. And all he had to do was just follow the path.
Yeah.
Because you imagine some kid, some young man walking out there being like, okay, this dude told me to do this. Yeah. And it takes faith to do it because it would have been so easy for him to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go back to the house and play my Xbox or whatever.
Yeah. And, that's what I think the beauty about faith is that, like, he's not going to give us the full picture because he wants us to completely trust in him.
Right.
That's ultimately what it's about, is us being in being one with the Father, being so connected to the Father that, hey, he said it to many of the people that he's called out. Do not be afraid.
Right.
For I am with you.
Joshua.
So like when we do that, it just builds our connection to him. So Abraham stepping out, not knowing where he was going.
Right.
What was the overarching theme of it? To draw closer to God,
right? For
God's will to prevail. Not Abraham's will, not Abraham's desires, not Abraham's dreams and hopes and aspirations of being this whatever. No, it was, I trust you. You're my father. Let's do this, And it's to just draw us closer for God's will to prevail over everything else.
Right. And a lot of times we don't see where he has already made preparations for us. And like you were saying,
fact.
you don't see the preparations he's already made. And you start stepping out on this and it causes you to become closer to him. Like, Lord, look, I'm dependent on you right now. I don't know where my next paycheck's coming from. I don't know where the next gas station is. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. And he prepares the way and he actually allows you to get closer to him, and I think it's a mechanism for him twofold. Personally, I believe that the reason he doesn't tell you everything all at once is so that the enemy hasn't come up with a plan to be able to try to stop it, But for number 2 is to allow you to take the steps like a toddler, like when a kid, you ever seen a kid, when, of course you have.
Yes, I have, sir.
But whenever the kid starts walking, slowly they get up, they'll take 1 or 2 steps and then they fall. Well, us in our walk with the Lord, especially whenever we're trying to grow our faith and walk in our faith with him, take one or two steps in the direction, and then we fall down.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing that youngin does is it never stops them.
Mhm.
If they get something in their mind like, hey, I guess that's why we have childlike faith, because we might stumble, but the first thing we're going to do is pick
Right back
ourselves up,
Yeah.
and we're going to continue walking.
Yeah. And like as you're telling that story, like all I keep thinking about is like you said, me helping my children to learn how to walk when they would stumble and they would fall. You could see they'd get frustrated. But one thing that they always did while you're standing on that other side, you got mom on one side, dad on the other side, they're walking from one to the other. What they always do is reach up.
Right.
They reach up for the Father.
Right.
They reach up for the one that they're going towards.
Absolutely.
And I think that's another beautiful part of faith walk and walking in obedience is even when you fall, not if, even when you fall, when you struggle, when you can't see the full picture, you can't understand what's going on, you always have the option to reach back for the Father, and then it just gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
That trust gets bigger. That confidence in the Father gets bigger because, think of your children again. They trust you completely as their Father.
Right.
And that's what he calls us, like you said, that childlike faith. Like
right.
My children have trust in me to know that I'm going to provide for them. I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to love them. I'm going to nurture them when they need it, and that's what we're the same thoughts that we're supposed to have to God. And like when, God tells us to go and do these things, calls us out in faith, he's going to do the same thing. It's like our children inherently know, like, okay, dad's telling me to do this thing I've never done before, but I trust him. Like he's not going to let me, he's not going to send me to a pit to fall, like he's going to, he knows. Like how many times have you told your kids, like, they're like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? It's like, just trust me. I know what I'm talking about,
Right.
I know what's best for you. I know what you're doing. Like so many times I've gotten into those little tiffs with my children, like, trust me, I've got it. Just do what I'm asking you to do and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's the same with faith and obedience to God. Is like, he's saying, I'm not giving you the full picture. Trust me. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
But in our pride, we're like, well, but what if we went this way? What if we did this instead? Or like, this would be easier for me.
Right.
But he's like, but I don't want that for you.
Right.
I already know what I want for you. And just trust me. I'm God. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
And you can, again, through this chapter in Hebrews 11, like you can see all of these people who did that.
All the way down in Hebrews 11, starting at 36, it outlines some of the things that can happen because you have that faith.
Mm-hmm.
Where right here it's like, they suffered mocking and flogging and chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawed in two. And they were killed with the sword.
Well, it just goes back to what Jesus said.
I know, but my thought is that some people may read that and be discouraged and like, no, I don't think I want to do that.
But that's, again, it goes back to what Jesus said. He didn't promise glitz and glamour and, ease and comfort. And no, he said, you will be prosecuted for my name's sake.
Right.
And that's what this is telling us is like these people stepped in faith, walked in obedience to God.
Right.
And they were met by XYZ of what you just named, persecution, things like that. Thankfully, we don't currently live in a world where those things happen, but there is still persecution against the people of the church and people of faith. But the beautiful thing is like here and now that might happen, but we're not running the race for here and now. We're running the race for what's to come. Those heavenly rewards, those heavenly prizes, those heavenly thoughts, and the race that we're running with endurance now gets us to that finish line at the end of our days, whenever it might be, whether it's here soon or whether it's Christ coming back to take his bride home, whatever it is, that's what we're striving towards. So what this is saying is like, even though they knew these were an option, guess what they still did?
What God told them to do.
They stepped out in obedient faith.
Absolutely.
Because that, at the end of the day, means more than sitting in our comfort.
Right.
He wants us to be his children. He wants us to continue to strive after him, step in bold faith and obedience to the things that he calls us to do, even if the world around us says, that's stupid. You're being reckless. you're being silly. I can only imagine Abraham's family saying like, you're doing what? You're going where? With you don't know where you're going? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And
what gave you the idea to do this? Yeah. Well, this is God told
God was
me.
telling me to.
What told you?
Yeah. And it's just like, but if you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, what God has called you to do, then that's what you've got to do. Because at the end of the day, like I said, if God's hand is on it, He's gonna bless it and guide it and show you what you need to do. If it's not, then it's gonna fail. But one thing that we can't do as believers is tell people what they're hearing and what they're not hearing. You can see in the fruit of somebody's life whether they are truly in deep connection with Christ, where they are hearing Him clearly, or they're not. They're saying like, I feel like doing this thing, and I'm going to say God's telling me to do that, so it looks good to my faith family. But at the end of the day, like either way, you can't hold that against them. Like if people feel like they're being called to do something. I remember a friend of mine was called to step out in faith, and to me, like it didn't make any sense. And I admitted to him later on and apologized to him. I was like, man, I'm sorry. I did not trust you. I didn't trust that you were actually hearing from God, because it seemed so outlandish and crazy. But looking at it now, down the line, it's like, yeah, God's hand was on that. Like you did what you needed to do, and I'm better off knowing you for having that kind of faith and obedience. But I was one of those ones that was like, are you really? Are you sure? And it's like we can do better as a body of believers of like encouraging brothers and sisters in Christ to step in obedience.
It's called blazing a trail.
Yeah. And that's what we've got to do. Like I think a lot of people have become complacent in their faith.
They have.
Well, no, I go to church and I do this and I do that. I serve, I'm stepping out in sacrificial obedience to serve on a Sunday instead of sitting in the service. Well, that's good, but like there's still trails to blaze. Like you don't have to go to Africa and blaze a trail to an untouched tribe group. You don't have to do those things, but you can go talk to that homeless guy in the front of your church. You can go talk to that person, or you can help that mother in front of you at the checkout line at Walmart, even though nobody really uses Walmart checkout anymore. They get it all delivered.
I don't know. It's all self-checkout.
Yeah, but you can, that mother that's stressed out, their kid's screaming and she's like scrounging, and you could see the look on her face is like, I don't know if I've got enough to cover this. Step out in that obedience and say, hey, let me help you. Whatever. Like there's things here in front of us every single day that we can be on mission for, that we can blaze the trail for, and break the cultural idea of what faith is.
What did Jesus say? He's like, I was in prison, you didn't come visit. I was in the hospital, you didn't come visit. All those little things seem insignificant.
Yeah.
Like what it boils down to is that people's like, I don't have time to go to the hospital just to pray. And plus, if I just go into a hospital and knock on the door, that's going to be kind of weird.
Yeah.
You could pray for people.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go to the jail ministries. They got tons of those, where you can go in there and help preach the word and help give some faith and help, I guess what they call it nowadays is rehabilitate somebody, but it's not really a rehabilitation thing. It's more of a transformation thing.
Yeah.
You don't want to rehab them into the same old thing that they were doing. You want to give them the faith to actually transform their heart, transform their mind. And then that'll transform everything that they think and their actions and stuff like that. So
you don't want to do behavior modification. You want heart transformation.
Absolutely.
And it's, but even that, like it doesn't have to be this grand ministry thing. It's literally just being a human to the human next to you. It's like,
love your neighbor more than yourself.
Exactly. It's slowing down and saying, you know what? I feel like I'm supposed to talk to you about something. How's your day? You know what? I feel like I got to go next door to my neighbor's house and just check on him. I ain't seen him in a while. I feel like this person in front of me, I don't know, there's something telling me that they're struggling, and to just ask them, hey, are you okay?
One question that I have is, how many of you truly know your neighbor?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. I mean, do you know, Like if you was to go next door, just knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'm Zach. I live next door," and they'd be like, "Oh, okay, that's nice. Have a great day," and shut the door. You know, I mean, do you really know your neighbor?
Yeah, but it's like persistence in those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you introduce yourself today.
Right.
Tomorrow, go ask them how they're doing. Like,
Right.
you know, when they're pulling into the driveway and you're standing out in your front lawn, like, go strike up a conversation with them.
Right.
You know, some people, it takes a little bit of time to break down those boundaries and those walls of like, I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone. Like, we're not here to like, you're just leave me alone. You know?
Well, I think it's not really necessary. I mean, I know the verbiage that they use in the Bible is your neighbor. But I'm thinking that what
your
they're
fellow
using
man.
is, just people in general. You know, how many times have you been somewhere to check out? And at a restaurant, you know, is the worst. Restaurants are the worst, where you find out if people are really
Jesus followers or if they're still trapped in the world.
Right.
I don't know what it is about a restaurant that brings out the worst in everybody.
It does.
It's the most wild thing, and like, I don't understand it.
Like people that you meet a group of people to sit down and eat, and then you let them mess up on their food or something, and it is just like,
It's the end of the world.
oh my God.
Yeah. You know,
I
like,
told you my steak should be
that
halfway.
person, that group of people just left church on Sunday,
Right.
worshiping Jesus. They go to Applebee's, whatever,
Right.
you know, and like you said, they got your drink order wrong. Oh, she's not getting a tip now.
Yeah.
You know, this is the worst
Absolutely.
service I've ever had. Or she takes a little bit longer because you've got 6 church groups that just showed up at
one time,
and she's, you know, one of the only servers there.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, where's that grace that you were just praising about?
Right.
Where's that heart that you were just, you know, pouring out to God? Like, use me. What if he's meant to, like, what if he's trying to use you in that situation, but you're so bitter about, I will never understand what it is about a restaurant that brings out the worst in people.
Yeah.
You know, my sister-in-law, she works at a restaurant. She's a server at a restaurant. And man, I wish I could hear all of the stories that my wife has told me about her experiences there, but like, it's not always bad people. It's not always, you know, people treating people poorly. That is sadly the majority of it. But man, like, there's been times where she's like, those people have stepped out in obedience. Those people have stepped out in faith and like wrote $300 tips out of nowhere just for I felt like literally wrote on a receipt, I felt like God wanted me to give you this $300, boom.
Right.
Or wrote on, you know, $50 tip and was like, with a Bible verse on there, like, I just really felt like something on my spirit was telling me to do this. It's doing those things. One, it's sacrificial. You're eliminating yourself, your comfort, your ease, your financial resources to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And 2, you're acting in obedience.
Right.
Like you're doing what God called us to do, and that's to see people around us and to be the vessel for him to move through. You know, because so many times my sister-in-law, in those moments of somebody's obedience to Christ, had been praying, hey, I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill this week. And guess what? Somebody's obedience comes in and God's like, I've got you, daughter.
Right.
I've got you.
Goes right back to Abraham. Hey, load up everything you got. Go straight down to this place right here. I'll provide everything for you along the way.
I've got you.
I got you
know,
back.
And that's the beauty of faith, is it's the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. We can't see what God's doing in that person's heart.
Right.
Or what he's tugging them to do or to say, or even vice versa. Like, we can't see what God is needing me to do with that person or talk to that person and what they need until you step in that obedience and you can see, like, man, I'm so glad I went and prayed for that person because they really needed it.
Right.
Or I'm so glad that I just, you know, went and hugged that person because they needed a hug. You know, whatever. Like, it could be as minuscule as that, or as grand as, you know, going overseas on a mission trip, whatever it is. If God is calling you to do it, period, point blank, he will see you through it every single time.
Absolutely.
Every single time. Even if while you're going through it, you're struggling, you're wondering, you're confused, you feel hopeless, you feel all these feelings, which is okay. Go read the Psalms and you'll see what feelings are all about. It's okay. That's our humanness. Even Jesus dealt with that.
Right.
Again, I said it last week.
Right.
The Garden of Gethsemane, like, take this cup from me, Lord. Like, I can't do this. This is so embarrassing. Anxiety so high that he was bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
But he did it anyway because he trusted the Father.
Right.
He took what the Father's will was seriously and did it because he knew he was in his hands. Like, what better example do you have? Do you need to like step out in obedience?
Mm-hmm.
He's got you. I don't know. Like, it's so wild to me. Like, if we just denied ourselves in those moments
mm-hmm.
of just like being obedient, like take ourselves, like whatever, like, okay, God, like, I know you've got it. I can't, I know you, this is what you're calling me to do. I've got to do it. I've got to deny myself and do it. Even, you know, I can't tell you, this is a conversation me and my wife have often. You know, she's like, man, I really felt like I needed to go pray for that person. And I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's eating her up. It's eating
mm-hmm.
her up. But the beauty of God is he's going to send somebody else. Or he's going to send that same person and he's going to get them to go and do what he needs them to do. Like there was somebody in my walk, you know, we stepped out in faith, quit my job and, you know, kind of Abraham-esque, you know, kind of blindly not knowing where to go, what we're going to be doing. And I remember a guy came up to me a couple months into it and he was just like, man, like, I think what you're doing is so awesome. And I just got to tell you, I'm sorry. I said, for what? He said, man, a couple weeks ago, I felt like I needed to, you know, give you X amount of dollars. And I was like, oh man, like, it's okay. Like, you know, he was like, but I really, really, really felt like I had to do that in that moment, but I was afraid on how you were going to receive it from me.
Right.
I said, well, let me tell you this. I said, God still provided in that moment through somebody else. But like I've come to the point in this season of like, I'm, you know, whatever, like I'm not prideful in it. Like, God, I need whatever you've got, send it my way, you know, because it was that kind of stuff. And it's just like, he worked through somebody else to get his will completed, but he can still work through that same person. And like, you know, through that moment of conversation between him and I, it was just like, hey, here's the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Do it anyways.
Right.
Do it anyways. Do it anyways. Every time, do it anyways. Abraham, when he was tested, he offered up Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
He took his only son, the one that he was promised, to the altar to sacrifice him.
Right.
Because he knew, it says here in Hebrews 11, he said, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, which he also received from him in a figurative sense. He knew, even if I sacrifice him right now, God's going to raise him from the dead or provide the sacrifice or whatever. I don't care. God told me to do it. I'm going to do it. He's going to provide whatever it is.
It's crazy that to be able to have that kind of faith, to know that if I do this, then he will do this. Yeah. And it goes back to what we was talking about earlier. Yeah. There's always an if and a then. Yeah. You know, if I do what he asked me to do, then he is going to do this. And everything in the world is based off of if and then. Yeah.
So, you know, my thought, my if you will, closing statement here is, you know, if you've got something that God is putting onto your heart to step out in faith and obedience in, do it. Do it. Every time, step out and do it. Deny yourself, deny your pride, deny your fears, deny everything, and know that God is with you. He's giving you the courage. He's giving you the strength. He's giving you the ability to be his hands and feet, to step out in faith, to do whatever it is he's calling you to do. Whether it's as big and bold as quitting your job and going overseas to be a missionary, whether it's to plant that church, whether it's to pray for that person at Walmart, do it. I promise you, it will never be regretted on the backside, but you will always regret it when you don't.
All right, that's it for this video. We'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and drop us a line in the comments. If you need any prayer, we'll get back with you. I'm Chris.
I'm Zach.
We'll see you in the next video.
God bless you.